Excellency is a nice word, isn't it? Just the other day, I was at a function where I was greeted as not as a distinguished guest, but as an extinguished guest. So this was a sort of puts things again in perspective. So here we are. But today it's about Europe at the crossroads. And the funny thing is, I wanted to say at a crossroads, because there are many choices ahead. And at each and every choice, there are other choices possible. So you have crossroads leading to new crossroads, etc. But apparently the English language only knows the expression at the crossroads. And as a foreigner, I should be respectful of your language. So that's what it is. But the one thing to keep in mind is there are many choices ahead. And choices we make now will close off certain avenues, but there will be other options open as well. And some will be leading to nowhere. And some will perhaps lead to nirvana, we never know. And what nirvana is defined by each and every individual member state of the European Union for itself. We, the Dutch, have a particular view on what Europe is and where it should be going, and that may be different from what other states of the European think or what the European Commission thinks. Talking about European Commission, it's fortunate that I may be speaking today. That's thanks to Professor Martin Holland, who was so kind to find his one tie which coincides with my tie. Orange, the color of the Netherlands. Because the Commission put forward its proposal for the 7-year budget, which will start in 2020, just yesterday. And there will be some room for discussion about that as well. Because this budget is not, it's money, of course, and you can say money is boring, but the question is, where does the money go to, and where does it come from? And that entails choices about Europe, where it is going, what its priorities are, and how it should be structured, what kind of institutions it should have. And those are all issues on which there is quite a bit of disagreement among European states, because we are all in different situations, so it's natural that we disagree. It's not something that is just European Union type. Wherever there are different interests, you will have to find a compromise, and that means negotiations. And judging by the first reactions to the proposal by the Commission, we've got 2 years of tough negotiations ahead. But we'll see. But first, perhaps, where do we, the Netherlands, come from? We've got a new government sworn in on 26 October 2017, which is exactly the date that your new government was sworn in. There's a new president in France, although he's been there for almost a year, but he still feels very fresh and invigorating. And we've got a new government in Berlin. So I've mentioned the 3 most important countries of Europe, the Netherlands, Germany, and France. And these 2, in particular those 2, but also our government, will have an impact on the European discussion over the next couple of years. The Netherlands is one of the founding members, of the 6 founding members of the European Union. So we've been there from the very beginning, and we see no alternative to the European Union. It is where we are, geographically speaking. It is where we are culturally speaking when it comes to values, democracy, human rights, rule of law. It is where we are in an economic sense of the word. If you know that 75% of our exports go to the other European Union countries, 75%. 54% of imports come from the other European countries. It goes to show how intimately tied we are to the European Union. We try to diversify, but it's natural, they are close. They've been traditional partners for many a decade. And leaving the European Union, as one particular Dutch political party proposes, actually 2 propose, is simply not an option. It would be national suicide. So this is how important it is to be a member of the European Union. Also because it is a community of values, it is the crucial underpinning for democracy, rule of law, human rights in Europe as we know it today. So our interest is to preserve, develop and strengthen that union. And we are actively engaged in developing new EU policies and will continue to do so over the next few years. But where do we want to go? And here I would like to use the word Euro-pragmatic in a loose, non-scientific sense of the word. We do see European integration not as an objective in itself, but as a means to an end. Increasing prosperity for our citizens, increasing security for our citizens, increasing stability in the rest of the European Union countries as well. But we're not looking to make it into a federation, into a United States of Europe. My Prime Minister has said in a recent speech, which he gave in Berlin, that we are striving for a more perfect union, not an ever closer union. Those last were the magic words, but I think almost every European country has moved away from that. And certainly we have. This also means that we don't want new European institutions, like a new minister for the Eurozone or something like that. We don't see the need for that. It is institution building which gets in the way of what the European Union is for. And we should always ask ourselves, what is it that the European Union should do? And our position is Europe is there for the big things, and smaller things are better left to the lower national level. So to sum up, Europe where necessary, national where possible. And here the terms like subsidiarity, do something at the lowest possible level where it can be resolved, and proportionality. Even if Europe has to do certain things, it also has to be in proportion to what you're trying to achieve. Now, what are the big issues where we think that Europe is essential? Which are the big things? Single market, which is still not complete. I'll come back to that later. Migration issues, which are still on the table. Climate change, which is ever more pressing, and you here in the Pacific know about that. But we in the Netherlands know about it too, because 1/4 of my country is below sea level. So while droughts are not particularly a problem, rising sea levels are. And there are wider security issues which are important to address at the European level, because countries alone can't do them. International crime, cyber attacks, things like that. And it was just a couple of years ago that we had a major financial economic crisis in Europe. And it's still not completely resolved, even though countries like Greece are on the way up, but there's still a very long way to go. There too, we need European involvement, European cooperation, European supervision, European solidarity, up to a certain point. That doesn't come for free. Every country needs to take its responsibility to get its own house in order. And one final general point, whatever we do, we need to keep in mind that our citizens, the citizens of each and every European country, need to become involved in the European project. That is something that was forgotten in the not too distant past, where Europe was understood and accepted at an elite level. But all of a sudden we discovered, through referenda, through the success of Euro-skeptical parties, that the general population was not at all totally convinced of all the advantages of European cooperation, didn't quite follow what it was all about. So what we need to do now is whenever we undertake something, we have to be able to explain to our citizens why Europe is the essential partner, the essential framework within which we have to do that. And again, if you can connect that to issues like migration, climate change, jobs and stability, you can do that. But if you talk about a new minister here or supranational institution there, it is much harder. 3 guiding principles for the functioning of the EU. The EU needs to deliver on its basic promises regarding prosperity, security, and stability, not in words but in action. 2, it begins and ends with the member states. The member states are the crucial actor. So this is one thing. We don't want to move forward to one European state where you have Brussels as the capital and the deciding center. It's the member states who decide, and it's the European Commission and the European institutions which serve the member states. And the third, and that's perhaps typically Dutch, But not only, because we are in very good company. I'll come back to that later. A deal is a deal. There are many agreements made within the European Union between member states. They have to do with economic growth, with stability, with getting your finances, your budget in order. And we think we should stick by those agreements. Every member state should do its utmost to live up to limiting the deficit, the budget deficit every year to 3%, for example. That means reforms in a number of states, and these reforms need to take place. And so far we see too little action in that regard.